Let's go ahead and start. Thank you for being here. And welcome to Sound and Foley for War of the Worlds, or Squish, Boom, Plop. And what I want to do is start off with talking about the history of sound effects, and I just stepped out of the light, so my apologies. The history of sound effects for radio. Now, there wasn't much going on with radio until about the 1930s. It was hit or miss. If sound effects were going to be used, somebody would just do something and then they would move on. It wasn't until the 1930s that you actually have the formation of the professional sound engineer or technician. And you actually start off with Ora and Arthur Nichols. And they are hired by CBS to actually create an entire sound effects department. And this is where most of what you would consider the Shadow or War of the Worlds or the Mercury Theater, this is where they're getting their people from to do sound effects. Now, they started off in vaudeville, doing some radio, and a lot of live movie house sound effects for silent films, because you would actually have to recreate these things. You wouldn't just have organ music, you would actually have bangs and thunder and all sorts of things, and they'd be doing this backstage as the silent film was being projected. So let's move on here. Now, there is a hierarchy to your standard technician within this time period. You have technicians who basically engineered the products. They are building the stuff like the Thunder Sheet or tinfoil. Now, they didn't build tinfoil, but they'd go out and find it. And this is your lowest level of technician. Then you'd have the button pushers, which I would basically be considered a button pusher. Basically, you're just controlling the things. You would be cued and told when to do them. Then you would have the artists who would basically have some creative control over what they were doing and control some of the other folks. And then the people that got paid the most, which was basically nothing, the stars, the artists, basically they could improv, they could create different things. Now, this is the interesting part about Foley artists within this time frame. They didn't like to be called Foley artists. Even to this day, they don't like to be called Foley artists. They like to be called sound technicians or sound engineers. Foley is for film, I have been told. Sound is for radio. Now, the pay for this job was minuscule. You are not talking, basically you are being paid minimum wage in many respects. You're doing it for the love of the craft. And to make it a little bit more enjoyable, they would play practical jokes on each other. One of my favorites, and you're going to learn about this individual soon, is actually a case of, let me get this out, matches. In order to do a wonderful sound effect, I'm going to do it close to this microphone. Ooh. You can't really reproduce that sound effect. That, ooh, oh, that's nice. I'm going to set off the smoke alarms. You can't reproduce that, and you have to use specific type of matches. And frankly, the paper matches, just like these, make the best noise. The wooden ones sound too crisp. These have a little bit sloppy sound to them. And they would hide these from the individuals that would need them until like 3 seconds before they had to do it. So they're going, and they're searching through everything on the table, freaking out. And then somebody just goes. And they didn't do it to be mean, they did it all in good fun. So let's go ahead and take a look at this individual. And he is interesting because he is the first African American to actually work in sound effects and was brought in right at the beginning of this process, Orville Wright. And the matches story is actually one that Orville would tell to future sound technicians, going, it wasn't that they were mean to me, they were just having fun, and they were saying I was accepted as a sound person. So that's one way to tell in the 1930s. If you're going to be accepted into this family, they'd play practical jokes on you. So let me go ahead and go to this. Let's get into the practical standpoints, and really that's why you're here. We are going to take a look at some sound effects dealing with walking. And as you can see, they have gravel pads, they have wooden pads, and they have stone pads there in order to make any kind of sound effect dealing with walking. And it's amazing, if you actually do some type of walking sound effect, you can make the whole radio play come alive and actually take up feet and walk around. I know that's a bad pun. Let me go ahead and get the shoes out real quick. Let me just do this. So a lot of times you would just put your hands in the shoes, and these are just rubber-soled shoes. And you can do somebody that, let's say you're doing a Halloween play and you need a zombie. Dragging foot, you know. That's all they would do. Now, to recreate sound effects dealing with outside, they would have a gravel pad, or in my case, I have a wonderful bag of corncob material. Let me go ahead and peel this off, and just let me use my hands so you can kind of hear it. I don't know if you can. Corncob is really interesting. This actually makes a great noise for snow, gravel, or sand, depending on how hard you actually crunch into it. So let me do that again. Can you hear that? And it's an amazing effect when you actually have it up close to a mic. Now, they would also do some really interesting pieces dealing with sound effects that are already recorded. So they would have record players and multiple record players set up so that they could do individualized sounds at any point in time. If they wanted a car door slam, they actually cut up a car and brought the car door in. Let's go ahead and go, since I was talking about footsteps, this is the more traditional way. You would just have somebody walk through a gravel pad or a double thick sheet of wood, or cornstarch for snow. And cornstarch makes a wonderful crunching, you know, that kind of squelchy noise when you step into wet snow and it goes. It is amazing what cornstarch can do. Now, let me go ahead and ask you this question. What do you think, and I'm going to bring up a volunteer. Who wants to volunteer? Excellent, Matthew. Thank you for raising your hand. So, we're going to bring up this question. What do you think on this table could make a good fire noise? Go ahead and come on back around. What do you think could make a good fire noise? Ah, cellophane. Let's go ahead and try it. Try doing something with it. Oh, nice. A nice crackling fire. Let's go ahead and add in something a little bit more with your other hand. So you're kind of crackling there, and kind of scrunch that up a little bit. Gives it a little bit more bass, a little bit more dimension to it. Go ahead and try this instead. Kind of a larger fire, you know, almost like a leaf fire or something like that. And go ahead and try this. Very good. 4 distinctly different types of fire. Thank you very much. Awesome. So let me go over some of these pieces. These are common elements within a sound technician's table. We have tissue paper, paper bags, and paper bags are amazing because you can do that. You can do this, and you can pop it. But one of my favorite noises, and I've seen this on a whole bunch of different cartoons, and it makes a wonderful kind of bellows noise, you know, like I'm breathing into a paper bag, I'm hyperventilating. Or somebody working a forge with the old style bellows. Or tire popping. We have more corn cob in a tin box. Let me see if you can figure out what this is. And all it is just corn cob in a tin box. Your ubiquitous canned cow. And then you can use any number of percussion instruments to actually create quite a few different sounds. One of my favorites is the type of cricket, and there are many different types of crickets. So if you're talking a regional situation, you want to do some research into what those crickets sound like. And all it is a dowel with some striations cut onto it and a wooden stick. The interesting thing is, though, that if you change the material that you use on different percussion instruments, you can get a little bit different sound with it. And if you want to, if you press really hard and move it, you can get a nice heartbeat noise too. And it's really kind of a high timbre. But another type of heartbeat noise is done with Engineering, Drawing, and Design, the 5th edition. And you can actually, and if you wet it, you get a nice, really wet sound out of the book. And since, I use this book every day, I won't want to, wet it. But there are a few other things in here that are not as thought of in radio sound. Now this is just, okay, I'm going to open up an umbrella. That's great. Or, and this could be bats flying around. Or if you're doing a big griffin flying around, from Harry Potter. An umbrella can do an amazing amount of stuff. And you can also create your own musical instruments. This is a piece of aluminum bar that has just been bent into a triangle. It's not a pure sound, but it does have a nice effect on radio microphones. And, go a little bit smaller. And do you hear the Doppler effect as it spins? That's kind of an interesting effect on the microphone as well. But then we can get into some more fun pieces, which this is called a spark gap machine. It's from the 1950s. And what it does is it creates an arc of electricity, which is actually kind of a fun musical sound. Get this set up just right. There we go. And when your batteries aren't dead from playing with it too much before the presentation, it'll actually spark quite well. It's basically a small taser. It's running at about 30,000 volts, but you can actually vary the pitch of the electricity as you move these things closer and farther away. By the way, this is completely filled with capacitors. Then you have your wonderful glass noise for, drinking or whatever. Nice, if I wanted to put that microphone up there. Or to do some type of ray gun, which is what we used it for in War of the Worlds. You can actually spin it, and it's just a standard glass. You can also use small wooden hammer. Ooh, that's an interesting sound, which actually, hammer on a glass is a great sound for an anvil. And then one of my favorites, which is something that I do on a regular basis as a professor, is cut wood. Since I'm a drama professor in scenic design, I needed a saw sound for somebody chopping down a tree, let's say sawing down a tree. That's it. And it's just a small tape measure. We have a whole bunch of different number 2 pencils, which make great, wonderful cracking noises. Now, this is one way of doing broken bones or cracking small wood. Another way is actually using strung spaghetti, just your typical straight spaghetti, and cracking that makes some of the best bone cracking noises. And then, let's go ahead and go to the theremin. Now, the theremin is an interesting piece of equipment. This was around during the time period of War of the Worlds, and we actually used it to create some very interesting effects. Let me see if I can do a portion of this, and we'll try to recreate it with some volunteers here in a second. But what we used it for was the sound after a shell is fired off, that kind of tinnitus noise. So let me go ahead and bring it up. And there you go. So it has that wonderful kind of ringing in the ear that you're trying to bring to the overall effect of you're right there with the artillery unit. So let me go ahead and play a little bit too. The theremin's interesting because this device is the volume, and then this is the pitch right in here. I always try to play the Star Trek theme every time I get one of these. So we will see if we can recreate the sound of the artillery firing. Now, this piece right here, you'll notice the shiny thing is actually something that has been around for a long time. This is dating from about 1545, and we're talking the days of Serlio, who is a theatrical designer in Italy during the Renaissance, came up with a whole series of special effects for the theater. And it's called a thunder sheet. But you can actually use it in creative ways, as you can see some of the hammer dents in here. And you can get a really nice, sharp noise out of it, or you can even bend it. So it's all about experimentation. Now, for you Monty Python fans out there, this is actually the best way to make horse hooves. Whoa! Exactly. Now, you can actually use this with our materials. That makes a wonderful kind of dog digging noise. And what it is you're just using the internal sound resonant quality of the coconut shells to create a different effect. Now, you can also use them This is kind of a wonderful hourglass sound. Now, to do any kind of coin work, a lot of people would say, oh, just get a whole bunch of coins. In history, when they needed a whole bunch of jewels, like they were going into Aladdin's cave, they would actually call Tiffany's and say, we need $100,000 worth of jewels to manipulate. And there is actually a case of this historically, that they would come in and the armored guards were sitting there with Thompson submachine guns around the person doing the sound going, looking down at him as he's going, okay, that's enough, thank you. And they put it back in the safe and take it away. We also, though, dealing with that, the idea of the real thing, we can use a variety of different things. Now, this is just a cap gun. And you would actually put in the little explosive caps. But what they would do in reality is use something close to this. This is a theatrical blank gun. And we're not going to fire it in here, but they would use blank guns. Unfortunately, in the 1930s, nobody manufactured blank guns, so they would use real guns. And sometimes there would be problems where they would actually have foreign matter in the barrel, and they would shoot holes in the ceiling. Now imagine, if you will, the sound studio on the bottom floor of the station and the offices of the executives in the floor above. It would get interesting. So blanks were always used. Now, we will typically use, if we are going to create a gunshot effect for this, we will use a blank, and you're not even going to be able to see this from here, but you can come up and take a look at it in a bit. We use something called an acorn blank. Can you see that? That is one of the smallest 22 blanks you can get on the market. And it makes a sound, basically a pop. But it's loud enough to definitely know that it is a gunshot. But here's the interesting part. How do you make that sound like it's bigger? Well, you dump out your water, you put the gun in the glass, blank gun in the glass, and you can actually shoot it into that. Or to make it even sound bigger, you use a real gun that will actually have not projectile, but material coming out of the front, and you shoot it into water. And it's going to give you a boom, kind of a really resonant effect. You can also put that glass on top of your thunder sheet and let it shake at the same time. But going back to my engineering text, this is actually the most effective gunshot or large bore gunshot that you can imagine, is just opening the book and closing it. And that's it. The interesting part about some of the microphones that they were using at this time, they didn't pick up a lot of the low end. They definitely didn't pick up a lot of the high end. You're looking at the mid-range, basically in vocal range. They're nothing like the microphones that we use today. So you are going to, if you wanted to produce something really bassy, it's not going to be picked up as well on the radio. Because think of the speakers that are also playing it out. Not just the pickup, but the speaker out. What would happen is it would go, and that's all you would hear. And it might even blow it out. So you would actually use higher timbre sounds in order to reproduce those wonderful effects. Now, I would like to bring up some volunteers, and we're going to start with something simple. We're going to start off with some wonderful papers that I still need to grade, and just a bell. Let me go ahead and do the bell effect. What I would like to do is have two people come up, and I would like you to reproduce a scene dealing with a person at the front desk, a concierge, or the desk person at a hotel who is extremely rude and does not listen. And all the lines that we're going to have is, excuse me, excuse me. And I need some business dealing with what the person is doing behind the desk, which is why I brought out these papers. You're shuffling through, that's what the story is. You're shuffling through papers. But is paper really the best thing to use? I need two volunteers to come up, and then we're going to get a little bit more creative and do a wonderful War of the Worlds sound effect. So, who would like to volunteer? All right, very good. Well, come on around back here. And what I want you to do is take a look at what we have available on the table and underneath the table too, because we also have some rulers, some more tissue paper, a box and a rubber mallet, a baby food formula container. Ooh, there's a bottle. I didn't even bring this. There's a bottle. So you can do that. We have wind chimes. We have all sorts of things. We also have the umbrella. I want someone to create the effect of the concierge being rude and shuffling through things and not paying attention, and somebody ringing the bell and saying, excuse me. So go ahead and take a look at it. There we go.
You do the bell.
Perfect. So you can go ahead and kind of scoot around to the edge of the table, grab the bell, take a look at things, try it out, see what you can do. That's half the fun of Foley. Oh, nice. Very good. All right, go ahead and stop right there. That is great in patience. It's amazing how a bell can have personality. Very well done. All right, now we're going to go to the hard one. So you noticed with the theremin that we can create that tinnitus noise, but we can also create kind of whistling noises too. We have all sorts of different things. What I want you to recreate is basically like a large gun, like a howitzer, going off, the shell flying through the air, and then landing and exploding with the equipment that you have here. So kind of experiment, see what you can do.
So howitzer.
So with a howitzer, you have boom, it goes off, it launches. Then you have the shell flying through the air. And then you have the explosion a distance away. So that's the other thing. You have to create space and distance with the sound effects as well.
The theremin makes me nervous.
That's all right. So I didn't explain how the theremin worked. Let's go ahead and do that. So this is your volume, and you can actually control it with your body too, which is interesting. So sometimes you have to kind of step away from it. And then this controls your pitch. And you can actually have two people operate it too. So if you find a, kind of like, and the pitch is controlled by how far away you are, not where you are on the antenna.
So there's a plane along here.
Correct. Very good. And a lot of people will actually use their hip to kind of, if they're using their hands on other things, you can actually kind of lean in to control volume. It's like surfing. It is available, for use in your office if you'd like it. All right, so how do you want to make the initial boom? Okay. And if you need help, let me know. So what is the effect that you want to do? There you go. Now that's interesting. Oh, actually that's not bad. Let's go ahead and try it into the corn cob material.
Oh, I like that better.
Go ahead. Not enough.
No.
Not enough. So let's go ahead and try to slam it then into that.
Nope,
Too much. Oh yeah, that's actually, it's starting to get there. We can even control, yeah, perfect. Nice, I like that. Oh, that's better. Let's go ahead and try it with this, which is just a cardboard box.
Oh.
Go ahead and try that. A little bit better.
Still need something organic.
Got it. Let's try that. Oh, That actually has a kind of a nice landing noise. That's very good. And is a great distance away. That's nice. Okay, let's give it a shot.
Okay. You're controlling tone, I'm controlling volume,
Ah, that had an interesting effect to it. What do you think? Do you think you can do it better? Let's go ahead and
I'm not
1
sure
minute.
how.
Yeah.
yeah, with 1 minute, let's go ahead and try it like this, if I may. So, you want to increase the volume pretty high. Oh, my body's in the way. So it's going.
That's it.
Very good. Let's go ahead and try that.
You ready?
Very nice. That's the hard
You
part
have
with the theremin. If you walk away from it, the sound comes back up. Very good job. Good job. All right. Okay. So let me go ahead and finish up real quick. There are quite a few wonderful effects. Now, I've also brought in, let me make sure that you can see this, a sound, just a washboard. And the washboard can be used to do a lot of different things. If you want to do creepy noises, since we're almost at Halloween, this can actually be done to great effect if you can mix it a little bit. This is kind of the sound of a ship creaking and sinking. So if you can add a little bit more bass to it for modern effect, you can actually get a wonderful effective kind of like. If you want to create, let's see, an effect of somebody zipping a zipper. Zip ties are amazing without having a coat here. There you go. And then my favorite, which is the air raid siren. And the thing is that you want to actually have and you can purchase this on Amazon for $39. The interesting thing is that we could do this electronically. We could do a sound, recording and play it on a computer, but there is something that can be controlled so much better doing it by hand. One of the last things that I wanted to go over with you was how to actually create some of the wonderful effects that you probably remember from your childhood. One of the great effects for like making a bear or anything like that, and this is what they did on Disney, is they actually used just a glass and made a whole bunch of noises into it and recorded whatever they wanted. To do coins like with A Christmas Carol, Scrooge McDuck, the way that they created the money in the bags is actually a whole bunch of spent .38 rounds, the brass cartridges. It sounds more like money than actual coins do. And that's the one thing that you really have to think about. Are you creating something for visual effect, which was what we did in War of the Worlds as well, not just the sound, but also the visual effect of it, to say, this is what the audience is expecting. If that's what you're doing, you're going to need to do it in a slightly different way. If you are just creating sound for sound, you're actually going to get in more into the organic portions of it. This is not going through the snow, is not visually exciting. Having an entire pallet of cornstarch down on the floor and walking through it is visually exciting. And that's the one thing that you really want to take away from this. Are you doing this for visual acuity, or are you doing this for sound effect? And the photos that I showed you earlier on in the presentation, they were doing a lot of these for actual visual effect. And sometimes they were doing the walking themselves because they were operating 2 other devices in their hands at the same time. Now, there are many really good videos out there from the 1930s that are talking about this is how this program is done, or this is how this television show created this sound effect. Well, one of the best ones is a punch. And to do it on stage, you're going to need to do the physical motion of it and actually create a punch. It looks like a punch, and we're going to do something called a nap, and that's actually the sound. The name of the sound is this. That's a nap. So I'm going to punch myself in the face. There we go. To do it for movies or for radio, you will probably take a side of beef and actually punch into it because it's going to get that wet, flowing, globular sound from a punch. Now, the question is, does a punch actually make that noise? Now, I did ask for a volunteer to actually punch, but nobody took me up on this. Having been in a boxing match before, there's really not much sound to me connecting with another human being. You are creating that noise because we expect to hear it. And that is one of the biggest things with telling a story. And when it comes down to this is all just helping to tell the story. Did we really need to have the whistling noise with the bomb or the shell flying through the air and then the tinnitus at the end? No. We were trying to paint a visual picture with sound, which is really interesting to think about. How do you paint a visual picture with sound? You do it on the expectations of what the audience thinks it's going to sound like. A good example of this would be gunshots within the film industry. How many of you think a .45 pistol is going to throw the person that gets shot back into the wall? To tell you the truth, it doesn't do anything. It goes right through the individual and they just kind of crumple to the floor. But that isn't telling the story well. So we are going to have some creative license. With the horse hooves, we are expecting a certain type of noise. Now, horses running, all you're going to hear is you're not going to hear. Horses are loud. They have gas. They smell bad. It's just terrible. You have leather slapping. It's a cacophony of noise, wind rushing past you. If you're going what it really sounds like, that's not going to sell it. Or if you're in an airplane, how are you going to make the airplane? Is it going to be, oh, we're talking at 30,000 feet. Or are you going to sound like it really is going to sound like, yeah, I'm at 30,000 feet. You're not hearing anything else around you because it's just not there. So you have to create the world. And that was the biggest thing that we had to think about with War of the Worlds. How do you create aliens? How do you create tentacles? How do you create what is being talked about at any given time? What we came up with was red Jell-O in your hands, squishing at the microphone, and getting all sticky is the best alien noise you can come up with. All right, do I have any questions right now? Or does anybody want to come up and just play? Yes, Jell-O is, and it's specifically red Jell-O. All right.
Were there any sounds that you needed that you found you couldn't recreate?
Very good question. We could not recreate an effective kind of a noise, almost like the microphone's quitting. We could not recreate that effectively and sustain it throughout the entire time that it would need to. Somebody would have to be going, and they'd be doing it for 10 minutes. You can't really sustain that because this is going to fade into white noise very quickly. You're going to have audio basically, you don't have the stamina to actually handle that kind of material coming in. So we had to create it with a variety of actually canned sound effects, which means pre-recorded sound effects, and what we perceived would be the actual sound of the microphones going dead, which turned out to be, for our audience, the noise that is for the emergency broadcast system. That wasn't around in the 1930s, but it's been around since what, 1960s, 70s, and it's something that is so iconic with us that we go, that's the emergency tone. The radio stations are going offline. So that is one of the sounds we could not recreate. Any other questions? That was a good one. All right. Well, thank you very much. Okay.